February 26, 2022, 3:47 a.m. Mykolaiv, Ukraine. Russian forces approaching. Southern offensive. Kherson fallen yesterday. Next target, Mykolaiv. Strategic port city. Population 470,000. Gateway to Odesa. Control Mykolaiv. Threaten Odesa. Dominate southern Ukraine. Complete southern conquest. Russian plan clear. Momentum strong. Kherson captured easily. Mykolaiv should fall similarly. Against them, Ukrainian defenders. Regular army. Territorial defense. But majority volunteers. Citizens. Civilians yesterday. Soldiers today. Armed with whatever available. Hunting rifles. Molotov cocktails. Determination. Against professional military. Tanks. Artillery. Air support. Everything. Mykolaiv should fall. Within days. Maybe hours. Nobody expects otherwise. Except, defenders refuse. Mayor Alexander Senkovich coordinates. Military commanders strategize. Volunteers flood recruitment. Everyone fights. Everyone defends. Everyone refuses to accept inevitable. This is Mykolaiv. This is Southern Front anchor. This is where Russian advance stops. Not through overwhelming force. Through volunteers. Through determination. Through refusing to quit. For weeks that become months. Russian forces attack repeatedly. Never break through. Never capture city. Never advance past. Mykolaiv holds. Against everything. Becomes anchor. Southern front stabilizes here. Russian advance stops here. Odesa remains Ukrainian. All because Mykolaiv held. Through volunteers. Through impossible odds. Through refusing inevitable. The battle develops. First days, Russian forces probe defenses. Testing strength. Finding weaknesses. Ukrainian defenders respond. From positions. From buildings. From streets. Not conventional military formation. Volunteers with rifles. Fighting from knowledge. Local terrain. Every street known. Every building familiar. This knowledge matters. Compensates for training lack. Compensates for equipment disadvantage. Russian forces advance cautiously. Urban warfare complex. Defenders determined. Casualties mounting. Progress minimal. By week 1, Russian forces frustrated. Expected easy capture. Getting grinding battle. Every street contested. Every building costs. Urban warfare negates armor advantage. Negates artillery superiority. Makes every engagement close. Personal. Deadly. Russian forces can't use overwhelming firepower. Risk civilian casualties internationally condemned. Can't advance without firepower. Stalemate developing. Defenders holding. Improbably. Impossibly. Effectively. By week 2, Russian offensive stalls completely. Can't advance through Mykolaiv. Can't bypass without exposing flanks. Can't justify casualties required for assault. Southern offensive stops. Here, at Mykolaiv. Defended by volunteers. Holding against professional army. For weeks that become months. City never falls. Russian forces eventually withdraw. Southern front stabilized. Odesa protected. All because volunteers held. Against impossible odds. For as long as necessary. At 11:47 a.m. March 30th, 5 weeks after first attacks, Russian forces begin withdrawing from Mykolaiv axis. Not captured. Not defeated definitively. Just stopped. Can't advance. Can't justify continued casualties. Can't explain failure. Southern offensive meant to capture entire coast. Stopped at Mykolaiv. By volunteers. By determination. By refusal to accept defeat. City held. Damaged heavily. Casualties significant. Infrastructure destroyed. But held. Ukrainian. Functioning. Resisting. Russian forces withdraw to consolidate elsewhere. Mykolaiv becomes symbol. Southern resistance. Volunteer effectiveness. Russian offensive limitations.
city defended primarily by civilians turned soldiers against professional military for over a month. Successfully. This is Mykolaiv. This is Southern Front anchor. This is how volunteers saved southern Ukraine. Through holding one city. Through refusing to surrender. Through making Russian advance impossible. Strategically decisive. Tactically improbable. Humanly inspiring. Mykolaiv held. Against everything. Volunteers proved professionals wrong. Determination proved firepower insufficient. One city proved invasion could be stopped. Southern front stabilized. Odesa protected. Ukraine survived. All because Mykolaiv volunteers said no. To Russian army. To invasion. To defeat. Successfully. This is Millfront. And what happened at Mykolaiv wasn't conventional military victory.
Was volunteer defense succeeding against professional invasion through urban warfare and determination, where citizens became soldiers overnight, where local knowledge compensated for training lack, where determination compensated for equipment disadvantage, where volunteers held city that professional military couldn't, for over a month, against repeated assaults, against overwhelming odds, stabilizing southern front, protecting Odesa, stopping Russian coastal offensive. The question isn't whether Mykolaiv held. Obviously did. Question is how volunteers without military training held against professional army. What advantages enabled this impossible defense? And what Mykolaiv reveals about modern urban warfare when defenders know terrain intimately and refuse to surrender despite everything. Official Russian statements about Mykolaiv minimal. Some operations mentioned. Never admitted failure to capture. Never acknowledged volunteers stopping offensive. Eventually, silence. Better not mention than explain failure. Southern offensive meant to capture coast. Stopped at Mykolaiv. By volunteers. This doesn't fit narrative. Better ignored. Mykolaiv became embarrassment. Volunteers holding professional army. City not captured. Offensive stopped. All visible. All documented. Russian statements couldn't explain. Chose silence. Evidence spoke anyway. Ukrainian statements, heroic throughout. Mykolaiv holds. Volunteers defend. Daily updates. Celebrating resistance. Acknowledging costs. Damaged infrastructure. Casualties. Suffering. But holding. Defending. Resisting. Successfully. Statements emphasized volunteer contribution. Citizens becoming soldiers. Defending homes. Protecting families. This narrative accurate. Resonated nationally. Inspired internationally. Mykolaiv became symbol. Volunteer effectiveness. Southern resistance. Russian failure. Statements reflected truth. Amplified appropriately. Stay with me. Because the detail that explains Mykolaiv's success, how volunteers held, is going to show you that urban warfare heavily favors defenders when defenders know terrain intimately. Mykolaiv volunteers lived there, knew every street, every building, every approach. This knowledge was weapon against Russian forces who knew maps, not terrain, not buildings, not approaches. Volunteers used knowledge, set ambushes, disappeared when pressed, reappeared elsewhere. Harassment constant. Russian forces never secure, never comfortable, never able to consolidate. Additionally, motivation asymmetry. Volunteers defending homes, families, city, lives. Russian soldiers following orders, fighting foreign war. Unclear objectives. These motivations aren't equal. Volunteers fight desperately. Russians fight professionally but not desperately. This gap matters. Urban combat. Close quarters. Personal. Desperate fighters have advantage. Mykolaiv volunteers had advantage. Used it. Held city. Against professional army. For over a month. Through terrain knowledge and desperate motivation. Compensating for training and equipment disadvantages completely. Let's establish what Mykolaiv defense actually was. How volunteers succeeded. Why mattered strategically. Mykolaiv strategic importance. Southern Ukraine. Black Sea coast. Between Kherson and Odesa. Control Mykolaiv. Enable advance to Odesa. Capture Odesa. Control entire coast. Isolate Ukraine from sea. Strategic victory. Russian plan required Mykolaiv. Quickly. Kherson fell easily. Mykolaiv should follow. Didn't. This single failure stopped entire southern coastal offensive. Prevented Odesa capture. Stabilized southern front. Protected western Ukraine. All from one city holding. Defended primarily by volunteers. Strategic importance enormous. Single point failure for Russian offensive. Mykolaiv volunteers prevented this failure. Held city. Stopped invasion's southern axis. Strategically decisive. Volunteer defense composition. Territorial defense. Core. Organized volunteers. Some military training. Most civilians. Armed with military small arms. Regular army. Present. Professional cadre. Providing structure. Training. Coordination. Critical. But minority. Volunteers majority. Citizens. All backgrounds. Age ranges. Professions. Armed variously. Hunting rifles. Personal weapons. Military supplies when available. Molotov cocktails when not. Training minimal. Days or weeks. Basic. Knowledge complete. Home terrain. Every street. Every building. This knowledge was equalizer. Made volunteers effective. Compensated for training lack. Combined with determination absolute. Defending homes. Families. City. Lives. Motivation unquestionable. Russian attacking force. Southern offensive column. From Kherson. Armored vehicles. Artillery. Air support. Professional. Experienced. Successful at Kherson. Expected similar at Mykolaiv. Encountered different resistance. Urban warfare. Determined defenders. Local knowledge used against them. Every street ambush potential. Every building sniper position. Every advance costly. Russian forces adapted poorly. Conventional doctrine. Overwhelming firepower. Doesn't work well in cities. Especially when defenders determined and terrain knowledgeable. Russian assault stalled. Then stopped. Eventually withdrawn. Not defeated militarily exactly. Just stopped. Progress impossible. Casualties unacceptable. Objectives unachievable. Southern offensive ended here. 5 weeks of resistance. Week 1, Feb. 26 Mar 4. Initial assaults. Russian forces probe city. Volunteers respond. Fierce fighting. Casualties both sides. Russian progress minimal. Expectations don't match reality. Week 2, Mar 5/11. Intensified attacks. Russian forces commit more. Assault repeatedly. Volunteers hold. Using terrain. Using knowledge. Using determination. Russian frustration visible. Progress negligible. Week 3, Mar 12/18. Stalemate. Russian forces can't break through. Volunteers can't push out. City damaged. Casualties mounting. Resistance continues. Strategically, southern offensive stopped. Week 4, Mar 19 to 25. Russian offensive culminating. Final major assaults. Volunteers hold. Repel. Survive. Russian command recognizes failure. Week 5, Mar 26 to April 1. Russian withdrawal begins. Forces pull back. Consolidate elsewhere. Mykolaiv held. Volunteers succeeded. Southern front stabilized. Victory achieved. Through volunteers. Through determination. Through refusing defeat. Now the analysis. Why volunteers succeeded. What this means. Urban warfare advantages. Cities favored defenders enormously. Every building is fortress. Every street is battlefield. Attackers must clear systematically. Expose themselves. Take casualties. Defenders know terrain. Defend from prepared positions. Can retreat safely. Mykolaiv volunteers maximize this. Knew city intimately. Used knowledge expertly.
made every street costly, every building dangerous. Russian forces couldn't overcome this. Urban warfare negated firepower advantage, made local knowledge decisive. Volunteers had knowledge. Russians had maps. Knowledge won. Local knowledge as force multiplier. Mykolaiv volunteers lived there. Decades some. Knew every street, every alley, every building, every basement, every route. This knowledge was weapon. Ambushes positioned perfectly. Withdrawals executed safely. Reinforcement routes known. Supply caches placed optimally. Russian forces had maps. Reconnaissance. Intelligence. Not enough.
Can't compete with lifetime knowledge. Volunteers knew what maps don't show. Used this constantly. Effectively. Decisively. Local knowledge multiplied effectiveness tenfold. 1,000 volunteers fought like 10,000. Through knowledge. Through terrain mastery. Through home advantage absolute. Motivation and morale asymmetry. Volunteers defended homes. Families. Everything. Motivation total. Russian soldiers followed orders. Fought foreign war. Objectives unclear. Motivation professional. These aren't equal. Desperate people fight differently. Harder. Longer. More effectively. Mykolaiv volunteers desperate. Defending everything. Russian soldiers professional. Following orders. This gap showed. Urban combat. Close. Personal. Desperate fighters have advantage. Mykolaiv proved this. Volunteers held. Russians couldn't break through. Motivation mattered more than training, more than equipment, more than everything. Volunteers won through wanting it more, needing it more, fighting for more. Strategic impact of Mykolaiv holding. Enormous. Southern offensive stopped here. Couldn't advance past. Couldn't capture Odesa. Couldn't complete coastal conquest. All because Mykolaiv held. Protected western Ukraine. Stabilized southern front. Prevented strategic disaster. Additionally, proved volunteers effective. Inspired resistance nationwide. Showed Russian military wasn't invincible. Showed urban defense works. Showed determination matters. All strategic impacts. From tactical success. From one city holding. From volunteers refusing defeat. Mykolaiv mattered enormously. Beyond city itself. Stopped invasion's southern axis. Changed war's trajectory. Through volunteers. Through 5 weeks. Through holding impossible. 3 questions from the beginning. Time to answer them. How did volunteers without military training hold against professional army? Urban warfare advantages. Local knowledge. Desperate motivation. Combined, these advantages overwhelmed Russian professional advantages. Training matters less in urban combat when defenders know terrain intimately. Equipment matters less when defenders motivated absolutely. Mykolaiv volunteers had terrain knowledge and motivation. Used both expertly. Held city against professionals. Through advantages that mattered more than training or equipment. Urban warfare's reality. What advantages enabled impossible defense? 3 primary. Terrain knowledge. Volunteers knew city intimately. Used this constantly. Second, motivation. Defending homes. Families. Everything. Fought desperately. Third, urban environment. Negated Russian firepower advantage. Made every engagement close. Personal. Favoring desperate defenders. These 3 advantages combined enabled volunteers to fight effectively. Hold city. Stop offensive. Against impossible odds. Advantages weren't military. Were human. Geographic. Motivational. Proved sufficient. Against professional army. What does Mykolaiv reveal about modern urban warfare? That defenders with local knowledge and desperate motivation can hold against better equipped professional forces. That urban environment negates many conventional military advantages. That volunteers can fight effectively when defending homes. That motivation matters more than training sometimes. that terrain knowledge multiplies effectiveness enormously, that urban warfare remains defender favourable when defenders determined and knowledgeable. Mykolaiv proved all this. Volunteers held. Professionals couldn't break through. City defended successfully, through advantages that mattered, against advantages that didn't. Modern urban warfare's reality, proven conclusively. The lesson from Mykolaiv is that in modern urban warfare, determination and local knowledge can overcome professional military force. Volunteers defended successfully against professional army for over a month, through using terrain knowledge and fighting desperately. This isn't romanticization, it's tactical reality. Urban warfare favors defenders, when defenders motivated and knowledgeable. Mykolaiv volunteers were both. Maximally, used advantages expertly, held city, stopped offensive, achieved strategic victory, through tactical defense, through volunteer effort, through refusing defeat. Lesson applies universally. Urban defenders with knowledge and motivation are formidable, regardless of training, regardless of equipment. Volunteers held, professionals failed, city defended, southern front stabilized, Odesa protected, all because volunteers understood advantages, exploited them, won through them. This is modern urban warfare. This is Mykolaiv's lesson. Permanent, universal, proven. This is Millfront. We analyze battles that define wars. Mykolaiv defense defined southern front. Volunteers held city against professional invasion for over a month, through urban warfare advantages, through terrain knowledge, through desperate motivation, stopped southern offensive, protected Odesa, stabilized front, all from one city holding, defended primarily by civilians, turned soldiers overnight. Against everything, Mykolaiv became symbol. Volunteer effectiveness, urban defense success, Russian offensive failure, city held through determination, through knowledge, through refusing surrender, despite casualties, despite damage, despite odds. Volunteers proved professional strong, proved invasion couldn't stop it, proved determination matters most, strategic impact enormous. Southern coastal offensive ended here, because volunteers for 5 weeks against professional army, successfully. This is Mykolaiv. This is Southern Front anchor. This is how volunteers saved southern Ukraine, through holding one city, through using advantages that moved, through fighting desperately for homes. Mykolaiv teaches that modern urban warfare favors desperate defenders with local knowledge. Regardless of enemies' professional advantages, volunteers proved this. Southern Front proves this. Mykolaiv's survival proves this. Permanently. Subscribe to Millfront, because understanding modern warfare requires understanding Mykolaiv's lessons. Volunteers can defend successfully against professional forces when fighting in cities, when knowing terrain intimately, when motivated desperately. Mykolaiv proved this conclusively. 5 weeks of resistance against professional invasion, city held, offensive stopped, strategic objective achieved, through volunteer defense, through urban warfare advantages, through determination absolute. Modern warfare teaches technology matters, training matters, equipment matters. Mykolaiv teaches sometimes motivation matters more, sometimes knowledge matters more, sometimes desperation matters more. When defending homes, in known terrain, against invaders, volunteers held Mykolaiv, stopped southern offensive, protected Odesa, stabilized front, all through advantages that don't appear on equipment lists, don't feature in training manuals, matter more than both sometimes. This is Mykolaiv's lesson. This is modern urban warfare's reality. This is volunteer defense's potential. When circumstances align, when motivation peaks, when knowledge applies, volunteers can win. Against professionals, against odds, against everything.
Mykolaiv proved this. 5 weeks, one city, volunteers defending homes. Successfully. Study this. Learn this.
Remember this. Urban defense works. When defenders determined and knowledgeable, Mykolaiv demonstrates permanently. 5 weeks. One city, volunteers versus professionals. Urban warfare. Terrain knowledge. Desperate motivation. Southern offensive stopped. Odesa protected. Strategic victory achieved. Through tactical defense. Through volunteer effort. Through refusing defeat. Mykolaiv held. Against professional army. Against repeated assaults. Against overwhelming odds. Not because militarily superior. Because urban advantages exploited. Because terrain known intimately. Because motivation absolute. These advantages sufficed. Against professional training. Against superior equipment. Against everything. Volunteers held. City defended. Offensive stopped. Southern front stabilized. All consequences of Mykolaiv holding. All achieved through volunteer defense. All proving modern urban warfare's realities. Defenders with knowledge and motivation can win. Against better equipped enemies. Against professional forces. Against expectations. Mykolaiv won. Through volunteers. Through determination. Through advantages that mattered most. This is lesson. This is reality. This is Mykolaiv. Southern front anchor. Volunteer victory. Strategic success.